In a packed courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy. Every whisper, every rustle of paper seemed to echo in the immense room. The tense faces of the spectators betrayed curiosity mixed with concern. Sitting at the bar, Malik, a 13-year-old boy, stared at the floor, his hands folded in his knees. His clothes, a little too big and worn, betrayed a lack of means, but his attitude, calm and dignified, contrasted with the image we had of a guilty person. His slightly slumped shoulders, however, revealed an invisible weight, much heavier than that of the accusation against him. In front of him, Judge Valerie DuPont, renowned for her rigor, her impartiality and her authoritarian voice, went through the documents in the case with meticulous attention. His glasses, slipped on the tip of his nose, accentuated the stern expression on his face. She was a woman in her 40s, elegant and imposing, known for never letting injustice go unchallenged, but also for her inflexibility. His piercing gaze intimidated even the most seasoned lawyers. Yet that day, something in his behavior betrayed a touch of unusual agitation. Was it the young boy's look? A budding intuition? Nobody could tell. The silence of the room was suddenly broken by his voice, firm but measured. Malik Ben said, "Are you aware of the seriousness of your actions?" She asked, fixing her eyes on him with an intensity that made some spectators shudder. The boy slowly raised his head. Her dark eyes, large and deep, met those of the judge, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. In that look, there was much more than a child's apprehension of justice. It was a strange mix of defiance, pain, and a shadow of hope. But above all, there was something indescribable, a recognition, as if this moment had been awaited forever. The judge, disturbed in spite of herself, adjusted her glasses to hide her confusion. "Answer my question," she insisted, her voice betraying a hint of emotion that she tried to control. "Yes, Madam Judge," he finally replied, in a slightly trembling but determined voice. A simple answer, but the silence that followed seemed to stretch the moment infinitely. As the judge was about to continue, he added, after a pause, his gaze still fixed on hers. "But before we continue, you are my mother." A collective breath passed through the room like a wave, sweeping away the heavy and oppressive air that weighed on the audience. The murmurs rose immediately, a mixture of shock, curiosity, and confusion. Onlookers leaned toward each other, whispering guesses, their gazes glued to the scene unfolding before them. The usually imperturbable lawyers exchanged nervous glances, their expressions oscillating between surprise and disbelief. The clerk, in an almost comical gesture, dropped his pen on the floor, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to pick it up. Even the prosecutor, although accustomed to the most unexpected situations, remained motionless, frowning, clearly disconcerted. But it was Judge Valerie DuPont who attracted all eyes. She, whose reputation for authority and mastery made the most seasoned people tremble, suddenly seemed vulnerable. Frozen in a state of stupor, her face, usually impassive and professional, deteriorated under the weight of shock. His lips parted, but no sound came out at first. She blinked several times, an almost mechanical gesture, as if trying to dispel a dream or hallucination. But the words still rang in the air, impossible to ignore. What did you say?" she whispered finally, her wavering voice betraying a mixture of confusion, fear and something indefinable. Her breathing, usually calm and controlled, accelerated as her gaze remained anchored on the young boy in front of her. Malik swallowed, feeling all eyes in the room on him. But his attention at that moment was only on the woman in front of him. He gathered all the courage he had accumulated to say these words. "You are my biological mother," he repeated, his voice slightly shaky, but firm. He paused, as if to make sure his words were understood, then continued. "I was told that you abandoned me when I was born, but I couldn't believe it. So, I searched for answers. And I am here before you today." The silence, already oppressive, became almost tangible in the cramped office where the judge and the teenager were face to face. The walls, although decorated with diplomas and law books carefully aligned, seemed to close in around them. Valerie, usually so imposing behind her magistrate's office, suddenly seemed fragile, a woman confronted with her past that she had thought buried. Malik remained standing straight, his arms crossed as if to protect himself, but his eyes did not leave those of his mother. He wavered between anger, pain, and a desperate need to understand. "I didn't want to find you like this," he finally said, breaking the heavy silence. His voice was lower, almost a whisper. "I just wanted to see you, know who you were. But I never imagined that it would be you, there, in this chair, judging me as a foreigner." Valerie slowly raised her head. Her eyes, clouded with tears that she was trying to hold back, met Malik's. She wanted to answer him immediately, but words seemed useless in the face of so many years of silence and absence. "Malik," she began softly, as if saying his name for the first time awakened a buried pain. "I understand that you are angry, and you have a right to be. But I promise you, everything I did back then, I believed it was for your good." Malik narrowed his eyes, his expression halfway between defiance and incomprehension. "For my own good. You left me, alone. I never had a family. Do you know what it's like to move from one home to another, without ever knowing where you'll be tomorrow? To ask yourself, every day, why no one wants you?" The words cracked through the air like whiplashes. Valerie clutched the arms of the chair, her breathing ragged. She would have given anything to erase the pain in her son's voice, but she knew nothing could undo what he had been through. "I was only 19, she admitted, her voice trembling. "I was alone, without support, and afraid. My parents turned their backs on me when they found out I was pregnant. I was told that I could never give you the life you deserved. So, I believed that putting you up for adoption was the best choice. I didn't know that." Her voice trailed off, and a tear slipped down her cheek. Malik looked away, his jaw clenched. He inhaled deeply, as if fighting against a wave of emotions he didn't want to show. "You didn't know what? That I would end up alone? That I wouldn't have anyone to tell me that I mattered to someone?" He shook his head, his lips trembling. "I didn't come to make you feel guilty. I just wanted to know why. And now that I know, I don't even know what to feel." Valerie stood up slowly, her legs slightly trembling. She walked around her desk and approached Malik, hesitating to extend a hand towards him. Finally, she just stopped a meter from him, respecting a distance that she was afraid of crossing. "I can't change the past, Malik," she said, her voice low but full of sincerity. "But if you give me a chance, I want to be there for you today, and tomorrow, and for as long as you want me in your life. I know it's not enough for everything you've been through, but it's all I can offer." The revelations continued to shake the two, turning each word exchanged into a stone added to a fragile, but necessary bridge between their two lives. Valerie, in a voice broken by emotion, recounted the silent hell she had experienced under her father's authority. "My father," she began, her gaze lost in a past she would have preferred to forget, "was not a man who could be challenged. All he saw was his name, his image, his reputation. When he found out about my pregnancy, his voice broke for a moment, but Malik, although silent, gave him a slight nod to encourage him to continue. He locked me up. I was alone in a country house, far from everything, without telephone, without support. And when you were born, he made the decisions without even consulting me. He falsified the papers, cut all ties between us. I never had a say." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time, Valerie did not try to wipe them away. She knew that no explanation would be enough to erase Malik's years of suffering, but she hoped that at least he would understand that she had been a victim as much as he was. Malik, arms crossed, listened, each word resonating within him like an echo of his own pain. Although deeply hurt, he saw in Valerie's tears and trembling voice a sincerity that he could not ignore. What he had hoped for years, an explanation, a truth, a beginning of an answer, was finally before him, brutal as it was. "Why didn't you ever try to find me?" he finally asked, his voice thick with a mixture of hope and reproach. Valerie lowered her head, ashamed. "I tried," she whispered. "But my father had everything locked. After his death, when I finally had access to certain documents, it was too late. Your adoption had been finalized, and all leads leading to you were gone. I hired detectives, called on contacts, but, she looked up, meeting Malik's gaze. I never stopped thinking about you. Not a day. An emotionally charged silence settled between them, interrupted only by the distant voice of the clerk announcing the resumption of the hearing. Malik took a deep breath, trying to collect his thoughts. This moment, which he had both feared and awaited so much, was both a deliverance and a test. When they returned to the courtroom, it was no longer a traditional courtroom. It was no longer a legal case, but a human story, a story of an unexpected reunion between a mother and a son separated by the cruel choices of another. Valerie, previously uncompromising and distant in her role as judge, stood up to address the court. His voice, usually authoritative, was soft and laced with palpable emotion. I wish to withdraw all charges against Malik, she said. This hearing should never have happened. Today, it is not justice that is at stake, but a tragic error that I want to repair, as much as possible. The murmur that ran through the room was eclipsed by the emotion of that moment. Malik, sitting at the defense table, observed Valerie with an indecipherable expression. For the first time, he saw in her not a stern judge, but a broken woman seeking to rebuild what had been destroyed. The media, which had already reported the beginning of the affair, quickly seized on this unexpected turn of events. The images of Valerie and Malik, leaving the court together, invaded the screens and social networks, causing a shockwave. But to them, this hype meant little. That day, in that courtroom, a lost family found a glimmer of hope. However, they both knew that the wounds of the past would not heal in an instant. It took time, love, and infinite patience. In the weeks that followed, Valerie did everything to prove to Malik that she was ready to make up for lost time. She attended each of her meetings with advisors to discuss her future, learning about her passions, her dreams, and even her pains. Malik, for his part, began to lower his defenses, one step at a time. He wasn't ready to fully forgive, but he was willing to try. And for the first time in his life, he felt that he was no longer alone.